Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Mexico's brand new cashless society and digital ID.
Bruh.
Yeah, that's right. I know for a lot of you guys out there, you guys are extremely worried about this. In fact, I did a video talking about this about a month ago, and well, you guys went hog wild with all kinds of theories as to what this means. A lot of you guys, were unfortunately disheartened as to what it means to move to Mexico, if you are going to move to Mexico or not. Because again, at the end of the day, for a lot of you guys out there, you guys are looking to run away from this, and yet, well, they're trying to implement it here in Mexico and, well, as you guys already know, all over the world. But what does it really mean? Again, I actually live out here. I've been out here for over 7+ years, and I've been talking about this for even longer than that. And I moved out to Mexico knowing fully well that one day, well, the whole world is gonna fall under this. But at the same time, I knew that Mexico was gonna be relatively safe compared to other countries out there. And guess what? In the 7+ years that I've been here, I have been proven correct. And well, you guys know I talk about all these things on this channel on a constant basis. And I'm gonna actually break it down. I'm gonna break it down even further in today's episode as to what this new cashless society actually means. Because again, for a lot of you guys out there, you guys are worried, and for most of you guys out there in the audience, you actually think that Mexico could become a cashless society overnight. And I'm here to tell you that we couldn't be any further away from that truth, all right? In fact, we're gonna even talk about the biometric ID and all that other stuff that a lot of you guys are so worried about, because as I mentioned before, a lot of you guys were extremely worried about it when I first talked about it. So I'm gonna break it down even further so you guys can rest easy that, again, moving to Mexico will not mean that you will be in that digital matrix. So with all that said, you already know how we do here. We're actually gonna go on ahead and we're gonna get on the bike in today's episode. The last time I talked about the digital ID, I was walking around at Centro and I was showing you guys tons of examples as to how this whole thing is not gonna really work out here. But in today's episode, I'm just gonna go on ahead and we're gonna get on the bike as we usually do, and we're gonna ride around the city as we talk about this very polarizing and very important topic to all of us out there. So without further ado, let's get on that bike and let's start talking about the new cashless society and biometric ID that Mexico is trying to implement out here for all of you guys and everyone else.
Bruh.
All right, guys, before we get started, I wanted to mention a few things to just get them off the table so that way there's no confusion, going forward. All right, so first of all, in order to be able to implement a digital prison, all right, in a country, there needs to be the infrastructure, okay, in order to be able to set it up. And not just set it up, but to also maintain it and, be able to police it. And so with that said, that is going to be an extremely difficult task for the Mexican government to uphold, here in Mexico. First off, again, in Mexico, the government is not like Canada, the USA, or perhaps your home country in Europe, in which they have so much control over your lives. Out here in Mexico, it's not like that at all. The government out here does not have that much power, over people's just regular everyday lives. On top of that, they cannot enforce, many of the laws that are already in the books, let alone anything new like this whole digital ID thing, or digital cash. On top of that, even the Mexican version of the IRS, the tax revenue service, they themselves have a lot of trouble just trying to collect taxes. And in fact, they're on strike right now. Also, as I covered in a very recent video, we got to remember that sometimes, there are national disasters, just natural disasters and emergencies that basically, do not allow for this whole digital cash, digital ID thing to function as you might think, it's going to function. This whole dystopia might be something that, could happen, where you're at, but out here, it is so separate from that. And lastly, in many parts of Mexico, people live in rural areas where they just don't have access to electricity or internet, or very, very spotty, shoddy internet. In fact, people complain all the time that they can't even pay with a card at the little store or at a store, or a chain store that is in a place that has spotty internet. So again, just please keep all that in mind as we go forward with today's video. So I know for a lot of people out there in the audience, this is a big worry. In fact, it's not just a big worry, it's a big worry for Mexicans themselves. As you guys can see, this is a big problem that a lot of Mexicans have, basically been voicing their opinions on for a long time. And for many Mexicans, they are rejecting this whole idea of digital money. And, let me give you guys a little context on all that. The reality is that, the majority of Mexicans, about 65% or more, it really just depends on the part of Mexico you're in. But a majority of Mexicans out there, they function in the informal economy. They don't function in the regular economy that everybody else does. And so, because of that, for many Mexicans out there, I wonder what's in here. I kind of want to go in this way. It's nice, very cool. Oh, I guess it's just a little aesthetic thing there. But anyways, and so for a lot of Mexicans, as soon as the Mexican president, announced the fact that, they're thinking about, moving into the direction of full digitization, getting rid of cash and just going into, digital payments and digital cash, a good majority of Mexicans were not happy with this at all. They were very, very upset. And they voiced their opinions, and they're voicing their opinions. And so, look, this is something that's going on around the world right now. They're trying to implement this thing, this whole digital cash, digital ID thing all over the world. In some countries, the people have risen up and they've rejected it. Many, again, in many countries all over the world, I can recently think of, I think Germany, rejected this. So again, it's not just like, countries that you've never heard of per se. So the reality is that, a good majority of the people out there, you included, are not welcoming this change. Now, unfortunately, in certain places out there, where you're at right now in the USA or Canada or what have you, it's kind of hard to reject these measures because, well, everyone's already on, functioning on that system. They're already on that grid. It's only, a few steps away, a few stones throws away for the full digital prison to be, enacted. And that's the thing. And so for a lot of you guys out there that are coming from, the US, Canada, other parts of Europe, other parts of the world, Asia, China, whatever, a lot of you guys are extremely, worried as to how they're going to be implementing this here or not. And so I've talked to you guys about it many times. The reality is that the good majority of Mexicans, they function in the informal economy. And because of that, what does the informal economy actually mean? It means a cash-only economy. Just like you saw that vendor at the very beginning of the ride, and you're seeing this vendor right here, and you see vendors all over the place. They're all in the informal economy. So anyone that's like a street vendor, anyone that just, does work on the side, like maybe those guys right there, those little tienditas in those stores over there, a lot of those are just cash only. Believe it or not, they really are. And so, sure, they accept digital payments. But up until recently, about a month or two ago, I know that the Mexican president said that for anyone out there that has a business and is accepting digital payments, that they now have to eat that payment fee. So how Visa, MasterCard, all these companies, if you have a business and anytime you have a customer or a client that uses their card, you get charged a fee. Well, normally, people are, normally businesses, they just go on ahead and they pass that fee on to the client, to the customer. So basically you're making a purchase and you want to purchase something with your debit or credit card. It's going to cost you a few extra bucks or a few extra pesos or cents or whatever in order for that transaction to happen. And for many people, well, the convenience of that is unmatched. So, of course, they don't even think about it and they go on ahead with it. And so even here in Mexico, for a long time, for again, in the last decade or so, there has been more and more digital payments being accepted everywhere. basically you go to the little taco stand, or you go to the lady that's selling pastries or flowers or whatever it is, down the street. She now has one of those pocket card readers, and they're able to take digital payments. They take digital payments with your card, or Apple Pay or whatever it is. But ever since the Mexican president said that now that all the businesses cannot pass that fee on to the people, but instead that they have to now pay that fee out out of their own pocket. Well, guess what many businesses did? They just got rid of it. So now this business right here that would maybe accept it, they don't anymore. And so on and so forth. So even though they're trying to implement this out here in Mexico, most Mexicans are not, accepting it, or they're just flat out rejecting it. And so basically, in the case of like digital payments, they're already rejecting it, because now they're getting extra taxed, and they're getting extra all these fees and all this other stuff that, well, obviously, again, I don't know if you're aware of this, but most Mexicans don't make that much money. And, if we're going to start nickel and diming them, well, they already have a way to get away from that, which is cash, the freedom that cash brings. And again, it's not just cash. You got to remember that Mexico also has a very healthy relationship with, precious metals, AKA gold and silver, and, even properties. This is why, a lot of Mexicans own their property outright, because that's where they put their money. That's the only place they feel safe, to put their money. Because Mexico has had a history throughout the years. Especially, this is the last time that this really happened was in the 90s, but they had a big banking crisis, and that banking crisis basically made everyone extremely aware of the perils of not just the banking system and banks, but also the government itself. And so most Mexicans have a healthy distrust of the government, of banks, and other institutions of authority and power. And so, again, this is why I love Mexico so much, and I love the freedom that they offer out here so much, because they're pretty aware of everything. So when Claudia Sheinbaum, about, again, I want to say a week ago from the filming of this episode, all right? So I don't know when you're going to be watching this per se, but fairly recently, she said that, again, that they want to implement digital payments and digital cash all around. Again, this is right after, about a month ago or a month and a half ago, when she basically implemented, a biometric ID. That for a lot of people out there, the whole idea of a biometric ID, well, again, it scares the living poo-poo out of you. Especially for a lot of you guys out there that are coming from places where they already have, all these digital IDs and digital cash and payments, and you're being taxed to death, and all these fees, and that can go on and on. So for a lot of you guys that are thinking about moving to Mexico or even other countries, well, you're scared. You're worried about, a good majority of the world also falling into this digitalized dystopia, this digital prison that they're trying to, create and build for all of us. And, out here in Mexico, again, from the very minute that they started talking about the biometric ID, for example, everybody was up in arms. First of all, again, as I mentioned in a video talking about that already, I mentioned the fact that, the reality is that, most Mexicans are not even in the system, let alone get a, biometric ID. But, one thing that a lot of, people mention in the comments, which I forgot to mention, or maybe I did mention in the video, was the fact that, well, guess what, guys? Believe it or not, most people out there, even most Mexicans, they already have a digital ID. First of all, you already have a digital ID. Any single form of ID that you have is digital. If you have a bank account, you've already given up your biometric stats. If you've been asked to take a picture of your face, for example, just for, to prove that it's you, that's it. They already got your biometric data, just a FYI. Obviously, if you're applying for residency, if you're applying for for residency, if you're applying for, passports, if you're applying for bank accounts, if you're doing any of those things, anything, buying a house, whatever it is, well, again, they got your information. And again, you've already given up your information to your home country, and they're just asking you to relay that information to the new country. That's about it. Okay, so most of us already have some sort of digital ID or imprint. And again, if you order off Amazon, if you do anything digital, okay, again, if you're watching this video, you know, in some cases, you know, even YouTube has been asking for ID, you know, from some of you guys, you know, in order just to watch these videos. So, you know, we've already long past that, okay? So now, you know, just to give a context on the biometric ID here in Mexico, I learned this, you know, I learned this after I published that video, but long story short, Mexico doesn't have a formal ID for everybody. So like in the USA, for example, everybody has a social security number, social security card, and that is linked to everything. And long story short, most of you guys use your driver's license as your formal ID, even though your driver's license is just your driver's license. But very recently, you know, they've even made your US ID into a real ID, okay? And what is that real ID? Well, they've made it completely digital, all right? So that's really what that was, all right? And what that is. So long story short, you know, you guys already know about that. And if you don't know about that, well, you guys should, you know, educate yourselves a little bit more on that. That's why a lot of you guys out there that know about this stuff, you're basically saying, all right, I'm gonna opt out. I'm not gonna get the real ID. I'm just gonna walk around with my passport. Okay, whatever, you know what I mean? Your passport is, you're saying it's the same thing. You know what I mean? One way or the other. So you saying, I'm not gonna get a real ID, it's like, whatever. You already got your passport, you already got the real ID. It's just, you know, for convenience at this point. So that's that. And out here in Mexico, they didn't have that. They don't have a social security number per se. You know, everybody has a corp, but that's a little different. And basically what they were trying to do is that they were just trying to simply, you know, get rid of, you know, just trying to get rid of the actual ID that people were using. Because again, in the USA, people use their driver's license, but that's supposed to be just for driving, but they use it for everything. So out here in Mexico, they use their voter ID card, their voter registration card, as their ID for everything. Because remember, not everybody drives and everybody has a driver's license, but everybody has a INE, I-N-E, which again, that is translated into, you know, just the ID, you know, again, just the voter registration, which is used as the ID. So every Mexican, just like in the USA, every American has a social security card, well, everybody out here has a corp, all right? And when you get your residency, you also get a corp, all right? Everybody, that's your number. And so what Mexico's doing is that they just want to, you know, get a formal ID, just get that corp and create a formalized ID out of it, all right? So that's all it is. You know what I mean? That's what they mean by digital ID, is that, well, it's their version of the real ID, all right? So that's FYI, you know, that's what that is. That's number one. Now, but just going back to the cashless society, you know, again, I've talked about this throughout the years on this channel. And I remember back in the day, you know, a lot of people just thought I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And, you know, I was just a conspiracy theory guy and whatever it is, right? But now fast forward to today, to where we're at right now. Well, now most of you guys are fully aware of what this is. And most of you guys treat it with I guess, the respect that needs to be treated. So anyways, look at all this right here. Look at this flea market. They have flea markets like this all over the city. Here, I'm gonna park over here to give you a bird's eye view real quick, all right? But look, all these vendors, you know, that vendor, all the vendors there, every single one of the vendors you see, every single one of the businesses, they're all cash only. You know what I mean? And especially after I explained to you as to how, you know, now they're trying to charge people, you know, in order for them to have, in order for them to take digital payments, you know, now that, you know, they're being charged to take digital payments, well, they're even more cash only than they've ever been before. And so now, especially very recently with the president's announcement that they want to go on ahead and make Mexico, you know, cash only. Again, she didn't say, you know, okay, when she was talking about the biometric ID, basically they rolled it out. They already passed it, they rolled it out. But when she was just talking about the digital cash, you know, she was just saying, okay, this is something that we should be pursuing and going forward with, and forget about it. You know, just her even mentioning that and talking about it, it made everybody go crazy. You know, most Mexicans were like, what? How dare she? You know what I mean? They want to just tax us on everything. This is a way that they can track everything, and they can track our payments, and they can track our wages, and they can tax us all the way up and down, all the way up and down the spectrum. And again, these days, a lot of Mexicans are fully aware of being taxed to oblivion. Well, because there's so many of us, Americans, Canadians, Europeans, that have moved out here simply for that reason alone. And so they're fully aware. I mean, they're fully aware of what the government is capable of as well. So they're not dumb. And so, they've seen this movie before. Again, this recently happened, 30, 40 years ago. So it's fresh in the memories of a lot of people out there. And so, again, for a lot of individuals out there, they see the writing on the wall. They are not, going to be playing ball. Again, most people out there are already flat out rejecting it. They're already flat out hoarding cash, and so on and so forth. And so, the reality is that, do I see Mexico turning into a cash-only society anytime soon? No, of course not. No way, Jose. Again, if you go to, the U.S., Canada, Europe, whatever, it's already a digital cashless system already in many countries around the world. And again, it's been mostly voluntary. Out here, it's been like pulling teeth to just get people to start taking digital payments, to get people to start opening up bank accounts, even take out loans or whatever it is. And, it's already been a difficult process to do that. And as people started to slowly, again, implement this into their lives, all of a sudden now, the president is bombarding them with all this dystopian stuff. And most Mexicans are just flat out rejecting it. And they're flat out just going backwards, and they're going back to their old way of doing things. And again, we've talked about this before, in other instances, saying, like, for example, remember, we haven't, I don't think we've seen any today of the new buses, but out here in Merida, Yucatan, where I'm at, they've implemented brand new state-of-the-art bus systems and a new transportation system and all this other stuff. And it was great. Everybody was loving it. Everybody was happy with it. Everybody was saying, it's like, oh, look, now we're like a European country. You look at all this fancy, buses and transportation system that we have. This is awesome. We love it. And then all of a sudden, the new government, the new mayor, the new governor, stepped in, with the past elections, and they started getting rid of them. They started, making it even more difficult for just the average person that was using the bus system to not use it. And so, for many people out there, they got really upset. Now all of a sudden they can't take the bus to work anymore. They, they got to wait in long lines, to get on the bus, or they now got to spend extra money, to take an Uber, or even buy a car, or buy a motorcycle, or buy a scooter, or buy an electric bike, or whatever it is, in order to get to work. And, the new government has basically said, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to start creating a system in which, everyone is car dependent. And everyone is dependent, again, on the cars. Everyone's dependent on all this stuff. But yeah, long story short, these are the new buses right there. And so what they started doing, the government just started getting rid of these buses, or, like I said, making it very difficult for people to ride the buses by only having, a few buses, in the most, heavily trafficked areas. And then a lot of people out there, they all of a sudden now, they're waiting in line hours and hours just to get on the bus, just to go to work, for example. And it has become inaccessible. And so, well, in most countries, that's it. That's where it ends, and people have to just adjust, and they have to go on ahead and do what the government says, because there's no other options. But what happened out here? Well, long story short, all the old buses, they were all privately owned. Long story short, again, there are companies out there that just have a bunch of buses, and they just have their own system, have their own routes, have their own, bus system. It's private. And so when the new buses came online a few years ago, the old buses, Well, they went out of business because, well, who the hell wants to ride an old bus that was falling apart with no air conditioning? And they were just, again, compared to the new buses, they were trash, all right? But again, as the new buses became inaccessible, or, they became too expensive, or, again, they just started getting rid of them and people couldn't even ride them anymore. Well, then the old buses came back online, and well, now the people are riding the old buses. Now people are, functioning again outside of the system. And so that's the thing, the one thing about Mexico that I love so much is that they really do not care about authority. They understand that the government's corrupt. They understand how horrible everything is. And, they just go and do their own thing. And they don't really have to rely on the government. Again, very recently, there's been, a bunch of national emergencies out here in Mexico as it pertains to like the weather. A lot of flooding, a lot of, just bad weather out there, and the government has been inept. And, this is another one of the many, many, many reasons as to why many people, they just flat out reject, the government, and so on and so forth. Because they're just, inept. So now all of a sudden, the government can't even take care of its people. They can't even take care of emergencies. They can't even take care of just the basic needs the people need out there. And then all of a sudden now, the government themselves is saying, hey, you can trust us with your money. You can trust us with your stats, with your information. You can trust us with just about everything. You got nothing to worry about. And we're gonna go on ahead. And we're gonna go on ahead and do a better job. Don't worry about it. But again, since most Mexicans, for the longest time, again, for decades upon decades upon decades upon decades, have lost so much trust in the government, and the government out here has been so inept that, well, basically most people just, function outside of the system, and they just function on their own thing. Again, as I was mentioning, the informal economy. Again, what the informal economy means is that these are the people that are not counted by the official government stats. They don't pay, they don't pay taxes. They don't pay fees. They just don't function in the normal economy. They function outside of that economy, outside of the normal economy. And so that's the thing. Most people, they're already fully, they already know how to function in that system. They already know how they can get by, without having to rely on the government. And most people are, again, very well educated on finances, believe it or not. They know the value of gold and silver. They know what money is. They know what currency is. They understand that, paper money is basically useless, and so on and so forth. And so obviously, if they already know that paper money is useless, and it's no bueno, well, imagine what they think about, digital money, and what they think about, the whole digital ID and the whole digital infrastructure. They know it's all, bull crap, and they all know that they can't trust anyone with it, and they're not trusting anyone with it. That's the thing. So I understand that a lot of you guys might be worried out there that, Mexico might, turn digital overnight. But I'm telling you right now, I actually live here, and anyone else that lives out here can tell you straight up, that's not happening anytime soon. In fact, I feel like we're going backwards. I feel like as, every time that the president opens her mouth saying that, hey, we're going to go on ahead and we're going to implement, digital ID, or we're going to implement a digital cash or digital payments, or we're going to implement anything dystopian that most Mexicans are not, not gonna, embrace. They just keep going the other direction, literally meaning that what they're doing is that they're going on ahead and they're just, like I said, rejecting that system and functioning within their own system. And like I said, they're getting rid of all that stuff that, for most Mexicans, well, it's just not going to fly. All right. And so again, this is why I love living out here so much, because of the freedom that you see all the time in my videos as I'm driving around, as I'm showing you exactly what life is like out here. Again, you can see it. I mean, outside of just a few businesses, let's say like a gas station, certain chain pharmacies, chain stores, outside of a few spots like that, for the most part, most Mexicans, they don't have to function in that economy at all, period, end of story. There absolutely, no reason for them to now all of a sudden embrace, anything digital. Why would they? Embracing anything digital right now is just coming with more cost, more fees, less freedom, all right? And long story short, as I was saying, not just in this episode, but I say it all the time, again, most Mexicans, they don't even have a bank account. And it's just, throughout this whole time, it's been, throughout the decades, it's been like pulling teeth just to try to get them a bank account. And now that, they keep implementing all these things and they keep announcing things like, like the Mexican version of the IRS, the Mexican version of the tax collection agency, they are, saying like, oh, we're going to start looking into your bank account and we're going to see if, there's certain movements, that shouldn't be taking place. And if you deposit more than this amount of money, we're going to be taxing you, or we're going to be doing this, or we're going to, and long story short, again, they're going in the same route that, well, most of us, have been experiencing for decades back in our own home countries already. And so, out here, since they actually do have a way out, and most of the people are, collectively, pushing back on this because it basically affects their way of life. Well, then, guess what, guys? It's not going to be implemented anytime soon. And I've talked about it in other videos and other episodes where, they've done this in other countries like India and other countries around the world, and they still haven't been able to implement it there, and they've been at it for decades out there. So, if they're just starting out here, it's going to be a long time before they even, get to that point, assuming they get to that point. And in my estimation, again, if they still haven't even gotten rid of cash in your own home countries, where they are trying to, digitize everything, and it's almost already there, yeah, I mean, come on, how far away do you think they are here? A long ways away. So, again, guys, I wouldn't, be so scared. I wouldn't be worried so much about all this stuff, because the reality is that there's really not that much to worry about. It's a lot of it is mostly in our heads than anything else. So, all right, guys, I think we're gonna wrap this one up here. Let me see. Should I trying to look for some shade? Whatever. Let me just end it here. Man, was that perfect timing or what? Literally, as I was parking the bike, the camera turned off, from the heat. At the end of the day, we are in mid to late October, but yet it's still nice and hot out here. So, all right, guys, with all that being said, I really hope that you guys enjoyed today's video, today's ride, talking about this very important subject. I would love to hear, your thoughts, your opinion on everything, that I just said in the show. Also, for those of you guys out there that are still watching and you want to help support the show, I sell merchandise. I got t-shirts. This is, I don't know if you guys can see it there, but this is a model that, my wife made. I also got a bunch of other, t-shirts and other merchandise that I sell on my website. So please, check out all the links down below. And again, if you want to also get a consultation, I help you guys out. If you're interested in moving to Mexico, moving abroad, and you want more information, you want to have a one-on-one talk consultation with me, please, again, go to my website. All the links are down below. You can reach out directly to me, and we can chat about whatever it is you want to chat about, all right? And I can help you out with, again, whatever it is you need to the best of my abilities. With that being said, guys, you already know the deal. It's time for me to get out of here. So again, if you want to help support the show, you already know what to do. But again, if the only way that you can support the show is just a traditional way, that would be greatly appreciated, all right? And what is a traditional way? Well, you already know the deal. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to please like, please subscribe, please share, please hit the bell icon. But more importantly than anything else, please continue to stay awesome. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.